Cord.
They're here.
All right.
Nah, it wasn't even that. It's just I wasn't like I didn't see that room. All I saw was general and stuff.
Fair
Yeah.
enough. What's up, man?
What's up, man? I just wanted to. How's your day going? First of all.
How's my day going? We're
Yeah.
live, bro. It's going great. What are you talking about?
All right. I just came in and you were just talking about Leonardo DiCaprio. I was just like, wow, what is this guy talking about?
Well, no, because people were talking about Greta Thunberg, and apparently she's been hanging out with Leonardo DiCaprio. We made a couple jokes about how he likes young girls, and then I was just like, by the way, Leonardo DiCaprio was clearly molested in Hollywood, and it's just like it's very clear and obvious. And then I showed videos that make it of him rubbing up on a convicted child abuser, and the child abuser like grabbing him and calling him hunky and hot. Cute little boy with pale skin, as white as as pale as a fish's belly, and it's just like, and then talking about like him in other interviews talking about being a piece of meat passed around. And it's just like, oh, okay, like it's kind of obvious once you think about it. He sounds high, to be honest. Well, he is a libertarian, so there's a pretty large possibility when you speak to a libertarian that they're stoned.
And I'm from New York. Now I don't know. I think it's just my New York accent. I don't know. A lot of people say I sound weird. I had one guy say I sound like Post Malone. But yeah,
I mean, kinda.
Yeah, I don't see it. But yeah, I just wanted to just talk about AE. And so first of all, I'm not a commie. Like, I am an ANCAP as well, or a libertarian. I just personally, we spoke about it before in a YouTube comment. I just personally don't think AE is a good argument, or it doesn't really set out to prove what it is people think it proves. Like, it doesn't come to the conclusion that people think it comes to. So, but before that, I do want to just probe you. Well, before I give like a critique of it, because I noticed there's a lot of times that I'll say what I think it is, and apparently it's just not right. So I never like to just go off based off what I read or whatever. I like to just ask the person. So if you can just give me like a brief argument, a brief like summary of what argumentation ethics is supposed to prove.
Well, what it's supposed to prove, or the logic of the argument itself? Because what it's supposed to prove is substantiate private property rights, but mainly, to prove the right of self-ownership. That self-ownership is a right? So we take as a libertarian, right? Rothbard did this as well until he supported argumentation ethics, later in his life. Obviously, it wasn't written until 86. So, there is a presumption of self-ownership, right? That's an axiom of libertarian philosophy, but it is an assumption that one owns themselves, right? And so someone could simply come by and say, well, I deny that you own yourself. And so argumentation ethics is the answer to that denial of self-ownership. So, I mean, I have a resource that I use when talking about AE, because obviously argumentation ethics is really complicated. There's not like a way you can just like spit it out in a sentence or two. But the first thing is like, so really the problem with AE is you have to start all the way back at validating the law of identity and the law of non-contradiction. I don't know that I have a good proof of those. Something I'm going to be working with on Saturday. On Saturday, actually, with Wellspring, is a better grounding for those. But so first, you have to prove that logic matters, right? And so what I would say is, first and foremost, the law of non-contradiction matters, because if one is making a statement that is self-contradictory, that it is such that the statement itself is meaningless, that it is worse than being true or false, or that we could simply say it is false, because it cannot be true. But really the truth is it can't be evaluated for truth, because it's a meaningful statement, because if I say, that you are a boy and you are a girl and you live both of those things, well, those two things contract. Or if I say you're biologically male and you're biologically female, right? Those things contradict. What I've said is something that is meaningless. It can't be evaluated for truth because it contradicts itself. One part of the argument contradicts the other part of the argument, right?
So this is where I see some kind of, I don't want to say confusion, but where I feel like we're not using the terms correctly, or if we're not using it in its logical form, because a contradiction in its, you're talking about a logical contradiction, correct?
Yeah.
Or are you okay?
A equals, A equals B, A equals C, like there's a contradiction. Unless, actually, there's not a contradiction with that.
Yeah.
Because A could be B, but like
no.
A equals B, A does not equal B, right? P and not P.
Yeah. So I was just about to get to that. So a contradiction in logical terms would obviously be a proposition and its negation. So it'd be P and not P, or in natural language, it'd be it is or isn't the case that such and such. So it'd be like it is and isn't the case that I'm eating rice. So
yeah, and Casimir has more colloquial ones too, right? Which is to say true statements do not exist. It's a logical contradiction. As it is to say arguing is pointless. Because you'd have to argue, which is a contradiction.
Okay, so but just to contrast to the examples you gave, because I do see this a lot when I do talk about AE, and it's like I feel like that sometimes people are confusing contrary notions with contradictory notions, right? So just using your example, right? I'm not just because you said it. I am a boy and I am a girl is not technically a contradiction, because if you were to write out those propositions, they'd have different assignments. It'd be P and R, right? Because not P would be I am not a boy. I am a girl, and is not I am not a boy, right? It may, and I'm gonna explain it once I get into the logical form.
No. I mean, like you don't have to explain it. I mean, like I'm trying to, like, we're live streaming, right?
I understand.
So like sure, if you want to get technical with it, the appropriate way to be would say is I'm existing as a boy, and I am also not existing as a boy, right? Like it's the exact negation of the exact former statement that makes it a contradiction. Not necessarily a separate thing that you could be, because once it's separate, there is linguistics or other factors that could technically make it's contrary, not contradiction. But it's, I'm trying to simplify. Like, we haven't even gotten into AE, right? Like now we're into do you believe logic exists? And now we're getting autistic and nitpicky about these things. Right?
Well, so one, I believe logic exists. So I don't think you, like, just for the sake of brevity, you don't have to go over that. I will take logic for granted, right?
Right, but you would also take self-ownership for granted, which makes the whole argument of argumentation ethics not necessary, right?
Well, what do you mean when you say I take self-ownership for granted, right? Because you
said you're a libertarian.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Okay,
so that means you believe in the right of self-ownership.
Yes, I believe that. I value people's lives, and I think it shouldn't be violated.
Right. So you don't need argue. That's not the point of argument. The entire point of argumentation ethics is to go to the person that says, I am arguing that self-ownership does not exist, or that is not a right.
Well,
right? So if you believe that humans have the right of self-ownership, then argumentation ethics is really just a tool for you to argue against other people with. It's not necessary for you because it doesn't do anything for you. You already believe that.
Well, yeah, but I believe for a different reason.
Hold on one second. Casimir, you always do this shit, right? You text, you type in chat like a girl, and I'm gonna need you to type like a man, which is stop hitting enter and then putting your other argument, because when people look at chat, you just have, this is a mistake in categories. What's a mistake in categories? What is this? It's devoid of context. So just finish the whole thing. I'm in the waiting room. Minor Prophet wanted to talk to me, so I don't know that I want.
Yeah,
Unless we want to.
no
We
offense.
can do it. We can bring him in
do
a
not
little
want-
bit, but I
No,
don't
no,
want
no, 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 no. I want to talk
ganged
to
up.
you. I do not want to talk to Kazumi. I'm sorry. That
Well,
guy
yeah,
is.
Casimir is a stronger opponent on argumentation.
No, is he? Cause whatever. That's
Mhm.
a separate question. Because I've talked to him on debate in text, and he didn't do a good job either. So, but I'm gonna talk to you. So the only reason why I'm getting into one, I obviously, right, me and you agree we're both ANCAPs, we're both libertarians, right? But I'm just saying personally that I don't think AE is a good argument, and I don't think
What do you mean
it's
by
really
good?
okay. It doesn't prove what it sets out. The conclusion you guys derive from it, or what you guys say, that
So you
it
think
proves.
it's an invalid argument, not that it's not good.
Well,
Like, you
I
don't wanna
mean-
attach like moral or
Yeah,
like
yeah.
tactical advantage. Like you're simply saying, I don't
Okay,
think
yeah.
argumentation ethics is valid.
Well, I don't even. That's another thing. I haven't seen it formalized, so I don't even know if it is an invalid argument, right? But I would just say that, and I'm not trying to be like overly, autistic about it. Like, oh, give me the formal logic first, and I could.
Yeah,
I could
I'm a
probably
Twitch
piece it
streamer.
together.
I'm not fucking Stefan Kinsella. I'm not interested.
Yeah. I'm just gonna try to deduce the logical form through natural language. I'll just talk to you about it, and I'll see what I could get at.
So are
But-
you like an ethical egoist? I'm trying to understand what you are, because you say you're a libertarian
Okay.
and an ANCAP, but you also
Yes.
keep saying, I believe that the non-aggression principle is something that we should do. And like,
So-
I don't see how that makes you an anarchist or a libertarian. That sounds like a market anarchist, or a libertarian or an ANCAP. You sound more like a market anarchist that
No.
is a ethical egoist that just kind of like thinks that anarcho-capitalism is the vessel that you would prefer, like not an ANCAP,
Well-
actually.
Okay, so one, I just anarcho-capitalism is the term that kind of vibes with me a bit more, which is why I use it. But I do agree with a lot of the Austrian writers. I mean, I have Hans Hobbes' book, Democracy, the God That Failed. That was the first book I bought back in I was young. I was probably like 22, right? And that was the first
Bitch,
book
you
I
never
bought.
bought a book before 22?
Bruh, I grew up in
For
New York,
shame.
bro. All I did was play games.
I'm just fucking with you. Go on.
Nah, I know. But yeah, that was my first book, and I still have it. I have For a New Liberty by Murray Rothbard. I'm familiar, and I do
Mhm.
agree with them. Like, they are, like, those are my guys, right? But I just personally, but I am into, logic and all the other stuff, and I do think that it's not more so just AE, it's also just my morality. So I will get into my morals as well. Are you familiar with anti-realism, realism, like more realism, more anti-realism?
Like, I'm in art or like in ethics? You talking about like in ethics?
In ethics, like the debate. So there's more realism and then there's more anti-realism.
Okay, yeah. What about it? Like the
Okay.
objective belief in an actual true
Yeah.
moral thing, as opposed to the subjective kind of idea that these are just ordered values that we have.
Yeah. So I'm an anti-realist, right? And I'm a moral subjectivist. So the way I see moral language, to me, the only way I can make sense of moral language is when people state it as that is their preference. Like
Mhm.
it's yeah. So when I
So you're
say
not an
I
ANCAP.
believe, I don't know why that would make me an ANCAP, but
Because in order to be an ANCAP, right? Like I to say that you prefer the non-aggression principle, that it's your own subjective moral opinion, right? But that
Yeah.
you don't actually believe that violating the non-aggression principle is an unjustifiable position, that it is morally wrong no matter what in any and all circumstances to engage in aggression is the fundamental belief of anarcho-capitalism and libertarianism. So you're a market anarchist. You're like last username, right? Like you're a market anarchist. You like the economic theory. You like the policy prescriptions, and you're against the state. You're not really an ANCAP because you can't be an ANCAP and also think that there are situations where it's presumably justifiable to engage in aggression.
well, okay. So this is the philosophy nerd, but it depends on what you mean by unjustifiable. So if you mean logically,
logically justify it. Yes.
Yeah.
There's
So
no argumentation of it.
and what? Yeah, and what does that mean? That it won't run into a logical contradiction?
Sure, that we could leave it at that.
Okay, so that's where I'm getting at, right? So I don't think someone having the like, again, right? I'm not saying I agree with it, right? But I don't think somebody having the opinion, right, that it is okay to aggress on a certain group and arguing for it leads them in a contradiction.
I
The way I see it is
I
that
think it
is
simply
that's
is true. There is no think or believe there. It simply is true. And argumentation ethics has been able to show that.
okay.
It
So
is morally unjustifiable. It's not a matter of opinion. It's a matter of fact. It's just
so
descriptively true. You can't argue against it.
okay. So before I get into AE, do you think morality is objective? So where do moral statements are true because of what? They're a fact in the world, or like, what do you think morality is?
So I don't know that I don't this is something I struggle with, right? Like, because now we're getting really into like meta ethics here, right?
Yeah.
And like
But
where
don't mean
does
to cut you
morality
off.
come from? Right?
Yeah.
So assuming that we are rational actors and assuming that we are conscious beings, right? Certain things that cannot be argued for logically must be immoral. Like you can't do it. Like you can't argue against it. And so I would say that is an objective ethic, right? But like what should man do, right? You know what I mean? Like these questions.
Yeah.
Like these questions that have been that are kind of like age-old questions that I don't know will ever be answered in terms of what a person should do. What is the moral prescription, right? I don't know, and I don't pretend to know. I don't deny the existence of an objective morality and what man should do, but I also don't subscribe to a theory that also is equally absurd, which is that there isn't one. Right? That there isn't an objective property there. Just like I'm not a staunch anti-theist because like I don't know that God doesn't exist. I just assume he doesn't exist because I don't have enough evidence to support that idea, right?
Yeah. Okay. So
I would say either side that legitimately claims to do so, fucking show me the evidence, right?
well, see, that's why I say the only way I could see it makes sense is if you spit it out in subjectivist terms. But so are you familiar with Kant? Categorical imperative, hypothetical norms, categorical norms, right?
I mean, like my like I need to read more Kant. Like obviously
Okay.
I remember the categorical imperative from like ethics in undergrad, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I remember it's like, you know, you can't people must be used as an ends, you know, like they must be used as like an in and of themselves and not like a means to an end. And then like he kind of
Okay.
like added to that because people were like, well, what about lying? And he was like, well, you can't
Yeah.
lie because like you deny the person the ability to make rational decisions because you're committing some form of fraud against them, and because of this denial, like you're he's basically talking about fraud, really, but he's talking about like that you don't give them the tools necessary to be able to make rational decisions in their own self-interest, etc. Like so, like I kind of remember it, but like, am I a big fan of Kant? Obviously not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But like, I remember some of it.
Okay. So this is now trying to bring it back to AEs, because I really think that's where the core of the disagreement is going to come from. Like, what do we take moral statements to mean, right? Because if so, let's say I say, hey, I think people. Let me know if this is a contradiction to you, right? So let's say I say, okay, I think people with blonde hair should be murdered, right?
Yeah, it's
So
a
I go,
contradiction.
oh wait, hold on, right?
Well,
Let
not
me
to
finish.
say it, because I
Well,
don't know if
no,
you're
no,
arguing it. Which
yeah, that's what I'm
obviously you're
saying.
not arguing it. Right?
Wait. Yeah, you cut me off. I'm gonna go into the arguing it part. So let's
I
say,
mean, I'm on Twitch. If you're making the fucking pro-Holocaust argument, like maybe just for a second I'll interrupt. You know?
okay, yeah, you're right. Okay, but I
But go
wasn't gonna
ahead.
make a pro Holocaust. All right, so let's say all right, let's say we're deer people, right? There's blonde deers and there's brown deers, right? So we're in a world where we're talking deers, right? So let's say one of the brown deers goes, "Hey, if you're a blonde deer, right, you should be killed." And he engages in that argument with another brown deer that disagrees with that argument. Is
Okay,
he
so
in a contradiction?
what do you mean when you say engages with that argument? Because the crux of argumentation ethics is really hinging upon it's hinging upon multiple things, but it requires like what we mean by argumentation. So no fraud,
Yeah.
no lying, and a
Okay.
genuine desire to reach some form of truth or to convince the other person, thus recognizing that the other person is a self-owner.
Okay. So let's say he has that desire that this person has self-ownership because he's a brown
Well, you
deer.
recognize the act of arguing and being able to make propositional statements and recognizing that he doesn't have control or ownership over that person is setting up a moral norm there, and a recognition that that person has exclusive control over their body, their thoughts, and their beliefs.
But let's say he only has those thoughts for the brown deers. And so he's engaged in an argument with a brown deer that disagrees that blonde deer should be killed. Is the brown deer that's proposing that argument but engaging in an argument with another brown deer in a contradiction?
You're not dealing with humans, so I don't know if the blonde deer capable of making propositional statements and being a self-owner.
I said that in the beginning. They're just like humans. So why would he? What is the contradiction in the brown deer having that argument?
This deer analogy is silly, right? Like it doesn't
okay, so
matter.
let's use a human.
These are all beings capable of making valid propositional statements, right?
Okay.
He's having a conversation with one demographic, right? About his opinions on aggression towards another demographic. He's not talking to a member of the identity group, right? He's not, which like right? He's talking to someone else that shares some form of characteristic with himself in his own group about using aggression on another arbitrary measurement against another. It doesn't matter. The point is that so long as that other group is also capable of argumentation, right? That they fit within the same framework.
Okay, but all right. I don't think that really answers my question, but the whole point is if someone values only brown-haired people's lives and they only choose to argue with brown-haired people about whether we should kill blonde-haired people, I don't see a contradiction.
It's not about the individual that's arguing. It's about the process of argumentation, right? And whether or not because you're trying to say that the process of argumentation is somehow encapsulated within the identity status of the group that you're arguing with. That's not true.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
I dismiss with that. What is encapsulated is the recognition of individuals that are capable of making valid propositional statements as rational self-owners. And by doing so, this becomes a norm that is laid over all individuals, regardless of species, hair color, eye color, or whatever, that are capable of making propositional rational statements. And from a Bayesian analysis of individuals, right, that fit within that category, that are emergent adults, etc. Right? This applies to human beings with human DNA because the category of human is a category that is capable of making valid propositional statements, right? But they have guardians appointed to them because they're not quite at that capacity of argumentation.
All right. So when you say it's violating the norm, what do you mean by that? Because now we're going back to the norm that you
established via argumentation.
So how do you know the norm that someone established when they choose to argue with someone? How do you know their norm?
So we don't know if the individual. I'm not a mind reader. I don't know if the individual is arguing in earnest.
Yeah, but
right.
But see,
but if
so
they
the
are
way
arguing in earnest, then they are establishing said norm.
But the whole point of the analogy was like he has that norm only for brown-haired people.
I've
Right,
already
and you're
defeated this.
and
I'm
no,
not
you
recircling
didn't.
back to
No,
it.
you didn't defeat it because I asked what's the contradiction, right? But so the contradiction would be it isn't okay to kill blonde-haired people.
His belief is irrelevant to the situation. It doesn't matter what his
So
beliefs
what-
are. What matters is
so-
that he's engaging in argumentation with an entity that is capable of making valid propositional statements. The observer, the third party, the judge, right, all notices that these are two individual people, right, that both have a right of self-ownership and are both establishing so.
Oh.
And the means by which they do it is argumentation. And so long as any creature is capable of argumentation, they also follow through with the norm that is being established via argumentation.
What norm is that?
What do you mean? The norm that you have is that you're recognizing that another individual is a self-owner.
Yeah, I mean we're
They have a right
circling
to
back.
self-ownership, that they have
Yeah.
exclusive control over their body, and that might does not make right, because you cannot physically, like, apart from some magical power, right? You cannot, that changes who they are as an identity anyways. You
Oh.
cannot change their mind because they have exclusive control over their mind. That's the beginning premise.
Okay,
The other things
But-
just logically follow through from that.
so I don't believe in categorical norms, right? All norms are hypothetical. If I value something, then I do this, right? That's how I see it. But so if someone is valuing only a certain entity that is capable of saying propositional statements, or however you worded it, right? If he's only valuing one part of that whole group because of a skin color or whatever, to me, he's not engaged in an actual logical contradiction, because a logical
Well, why does it
contradiction would
matter
be
to you? You don't
because
believe, you don't
you
believe in
just said-
establishment. You think that everything is arbitrary and subjective, including logic here. So it doesn't matter if it's a logical contradiction. You're just making meaningless statements. Like what you were saying once you say that I don't believe in the establishment of norms or like the rules of logic,
Yeah.
then you're in a position where there's no difference between what the argument you're attempting to make and you going right? Like
Okay.
you're admitting that you are a creature incapable of existence as of morality, and that you must thus be caged,
So,
and society must be protected from it.
okay, that's nice, but I didn't say anything about logic. I said morality, norms, right? Hypothetical and categorical norms. I'm talking about morals, right?
Okay.
I don't believe in you shouldn't kill, period, as if it's written in the universe, right?
Mhm.
I believe in if it comes from a subject's values, a hypothetical norm. So you saying he's violating the norm seems to me that you're talking about a categorical norm, like you shouldn't kill, period. Like,
It's
Rep-
unjustifiable.
and
Cannot
what do you
morally
mean by
justify
that?
killing.
And what do you mean-
Justify killing. Justify
Just-
killing,
what do
murdering
you mean
someone.
by justify?
Look. If you want to have a conversation about about
No,
this,
it's a
that's
valid-
fine.
No,
Right.
it's a valid question, because to me,
You
I
need to
can
be
say-
able to make a valid propositional statement, right? You need to be
Yes.
able to make a statement that is not contradictory and
okay,
doesn't and doesn't contradict the three laws of thought.
all right. So, are you familiar with logical forms, modus ponens, modus tonens? Do you know
Dude,
those?
I took logic like
Okay.
7 years ago, and I
Look.
mapped sentences. Am I
Okay, but it's-
am I super familiar with it? Like, no.
But okay, so it's important though if we're going to talk about contradictions.
But you don't
and
believe in logic,
right?
so it doesn't matter.
Why? That's such a red herring, because I'm not talking about logic. I'm talking about AE and moral norms. So why are you bringing that up?
Because you're saying that you don't believe in categorical norms at all. You're
Yeah.
saying you just don't believe in any norms.
Are you talking
believe
about?
that you believe that logic can apply inconsistent. And so by
No,
saying that
I
you believe that
don't.
logic can apply, yeah, you do. You believe it can apply to brown deers.
I
but
like
not
how
to
you're
blonde
telling me what I think, right? When I'm trying to ask a question, right?
No, I'm just
No, you're mind reading, right? Just let
I'm not
me,
mind reading. I'm just saying what you said.
I didn't say anything about logic being you could apply inconsistently. When did that come out of my mouth?
You believe that logic can be applied to one identity group and the same
No,
logic not be applied to
that's
another
not
identity
what
group.
I said, right? That's not what I didn't say anything about identity groups. I gave that as an example to show a contradiction. Look,
Okay.
the modus ponens, P implies Q, P therefore Q. Valid logical form, no contradiction, no nothing. If someone says, if you have blonde hair, then you should die, you have blonde hair, therefore you should die. You have blonde hair, if you have blonde hair is P, it implies Q, then you should die. Q, P, therefore Q. Valid logical form for obviously a moral norm that me and you both disagree with. But the argument is valid. It's a logical valid form. It's modus ponens.
Well, now
Where's
you're
the
not even
contradiction?
the contradiction is that both of the individuals are the same.
No,
You're
see,
introducing you're no
no,
you're
no, no,
saying
that's
you're
not a
no you're
contradiction.
saying P and
I
Q.
need
No, you're
P and not
no
P. I need
no
P and not
let's
P.
map this out, right? They're
Okay.
both human individuals capable of making
Yeah.
rational decisions and capable of logic. And so they both belong to the same category. What you're doing is you're adding another category on top of it and saying, see,
No,
this is P and Q, and you're ignoring the P is not P that is in
no.
the logic. So
The
that's the
argument
problem.
didn't say anything. Obviously, the argument both agrees that they're humans. But the whole
Exactly.
point,
P and not P.
yes, but one, they're
There's the contradiction for you.
So say it in natural language. What's the contradiction?
Okay, so when you say a human with blonde hair
No, you're
and a
already
human with brown hair, right? You
yes.
said people. We'll say people. You used people in both examples, and the people is the logical contradiction. They're
No,
both
that's
people.
the contradiction.
You're adding an identifier to invalidate
No,
the presupposition for an individual to have blonde or brown hair. They have to be a person.
the
The
contradiction would
person
be
is it's the contradiction here, not the color of hair, not the identity group, not
no.
what type of deer or bear they are.
You you don't get logic. Look, the contradiction would be it isn't the case that you should die. That's the contradiction because it's P and not P. The whole point is, look, you could put a logical valid form to a moral statement and disagree with it.
Yeah, of course. There's a difference
Yeah,
between whether or not
that's
something's logically sound and then whether or
yes.
not it's
So
true or false.
okay. So my point is, someone could come up with an argument like that for a moral norm, and it's logically valid. There's no contradiction. I just think what you and all these other people in AE just have a knack to go, oh, that's unjustifiable. But you mean in every case it's the wrong thing to do, which I could agree with. I don't think you should be going around killing humans. But that's separate to whether the argument that's being put forth is logically valid or not, which clearly it is. It's modus ponens form.
I mean, do you want to engage with argumentation ethics, or do you want to skip argumentation ethics as a means of invalidating argumentation ethics? You skipped the whole point is that there is a foundation beneath that you have to recognize, which is that people that are capable, that you're arguing, right, and that you're engaged in a performative contradiction when you try and attempt to claim that that there is a form of justification, moral justification for aggression, because you're engaged in recognizing a norm that people that people are exclusive owners of their own body and have this right that you cannot control, and you are arguing that they do not. There's the contradiction. You seem to have I'm not introducing you to argumentation ethics, right? Like you have a specific disagreement with something that you presumably know well, right? So I don't need to explain that, right? And then again with this other thing, you're saying, see, I can say people with blue hair and blue eyes and people with green eyes. And I'm like, yeah, but the problem is that we're talking about argumentation ethics and why there's a presupposition there, which applies to the category of people. And people is a great example because it's P.
Wait.
And you're arguing P and not P.
No. But that's why I gave the example. What if I only argue that to brown-haired people? Am I still in a contradiction?
Yes.
What's the contradiction?
People. This seems like we're just going in circles.
People is the contradiction. You think if I went into contradiction in the definition, it would say people. I need the proposition it is and isn't the case that what's the contradiction?
I've already explained this multiple times. I don't like you're just denying it,
I
and like
no, I
because
didn't.
you disagree, and that's okay. Like, but
No,
like
I'm not
you're trying to
denying it.
pretend like I haven't already said this multiple times.
Because I didn't hear an answer to my question. If I'm only gonna choose to engage in argumentation with a group that I value and that's it, the other group I don't value and I could kill them
Your
whenever
value is
like
irrelevant. I don't give a fuck about your value.
so when you say they're contradicting the norm, what does that mean? Because I only take norm to mean a hypothetical norm. If I value something, then X.
Right.
What norm are they?
The norm that you're establishing is that people capable that by arguing, people that can argue, that are capable of making valid propositional statements via argumentation, that both of you individuals are self-owners. That is the norm. And that norm applies to the group that you added another demographic data point to say that you don't value them. You can value them or not value them. I don't care. You've established the norm that individuals that are capable of argumentation and are capable of making those are self-owners. And that applies to the blonde-haired people, no matter, or the blue-haired people, or the Jews, or the deer people, or whatever else, so long as they're capable of those same things. They meet those same things. It's unjustifiable.
So you're saying the act of engagement, and so there's two groups I value, this group, group A and group B. And if I engage with an argument with someone in group A, that engaging with the argument presupposes the norm that I value group B.
You are valuing people and their argumentation. Like value, I don't know why we keep sneaking the word value in. I get that you're like a subjectivist and you don't believe in like morality as like as an objective thing, right? And like, yeah, I don't want to get into that, right? But I'm not going to use that I'm not going to use the language that is seeded with the presupposition that there is no objective morality, because that's silly, right? It's not a good way to discuss it, because we're engaged with logic here, right? And so what you're saying, what I'm saying is that you're engaging with an entity, whatever that entity is, right? And that entity is capable of argumentation, and you're capable of argumentation. Whatever your opinions are, you can have horrible fucking opinions, right? You could have the worst opinions, or you could have the best. It doesn't matter. You're establishing a norm that via argumentation, you're recognizing that other individuals capable of argumentation, right, are rational self-owners, that you can't change their opinion and get some form of truth or change what it is that they believe or try and get them to believe your opinions via any form of force. It's not possible, right? You may torture them enough and then eventually they change to your opinion, or they don't change to your opinion, right? You're establishing that norm. That applies to the category that you wish to exclude based off of your opinion. It doesn't matter that you only believe this. It doesn't matter what you believe at all, right? What matters is that you're attempting to find truth and convince this person of your argument. And you recognize that in order to do so, that person has their own opinions, that person is capable of arguing back with you, and that you must engage in argumentation and you must establish the norm of self-ownership in order to do so. And it's based upon the ability to argue. And that category applies to all things that can argue. It doesn't matter that you think it doesn't.
Wait, okay. So you're saying by arguing with someone, you're automatically establishing the norm that everything that can argue has self-ownership? And,
yes.
And what does that entail?
That is the argument of argumentation ethics.
Okay. So I don't even think I agree with that. Right? Because what?
Okay.
So can they, and that's it, that they only agree with the norm that only things that argue have self-ownership? What about things that can't argue? Are they establishing a norm that?
So what you mean?
I'm saying if someone was to argue, right, are they engaging in a norm that also things that can't argue should have self-ownership?
So I kind of already talked about this before with children, right? But you
No,
could do the same thing with other entities, right? I said like the category human is a category that is capable of argumentation. There's some humans, right, that belong in that category but are incapable of argumentation. They need guardianships because they don't have the capacity for consent.
okay, but I'm not even really talking about humans. I'm just talking about the proposition, right? So are you saying that when you argue, you're presupposing the norm that you have self-ownership?
Yes.
I mean, you're presupposing that,
Mhm.
um, yeah, and that it shouldn't be violated, that things that can argue have self-ownership, and
Yes.
therefore the right shouldn't be violated. And I'm saying, when you argue, what about so if it can't argue, what's the norm there? Do you value it or not?
They're not moral agents unless they belong to a category of individual of a category that is capable of argumentation. So like mentally challenged people, right, are not really moral agents. They need a guardian. They don't have a capacity to consent, but they belong to the category human, right? So we treat them as we would treat humans. But nevertheless,
Okay.
they need a guardian, right? Like they're not capable of making valid statements. Like they
Yeah,
obviously can't consent. They have, right? Like, but they belong to that category.
yeah, but it's still weird to me because people can argue I don't think arguing has some inherent norm built into it. People argue for all different types of reasons, right? Like unless you
This
because
is irrelevant. Like it doesn't
no,
deal
no,
with it
but
doesn't
it
deal
is
with the
sort
claim.
of but it is still sort of relevant, right? Because
No,
you're saying
it's
it
irrelevant.
is, right? No, let me explain.
Doesn't matter what
Because
you're arguing for. The argument is the process of argumentation, not what it is
no,
that you're arguing for.
no. That's not what I'm
All right,
saying. I'm saying
give me an example that doesn't establish that as a norm.
no.
That is a
Hold
legitimate
on.
argument.
No, just listen to me. What I'm
No, don't say
saying
no.
is,
Just give me an example. You say people can do that.
because as I'm saying,
Claiming
people
it's
can.
relevant.
All right, but let me explain why what your definition of argumentation is doing, or what I think it's doing, right? It sounds like you're building in the norm into arguing that when you argue, this is the norm you must have. Like, I don't agree with that.
No, you're
I
establishing the norm via argumentation.
just, yeah, I still
Process
don't
of
get that.
argumentation. I
So
mean, I could
you're
explain it again, but it's not going to be. I'm not
you're,
going to
you're
say anything new.
yeah. So if let's say I choose to engage in a debate where we both exchange propositional statements to each other, and how I
Mhm.
think like, oh, this guy should be killed, right? But the reason why I'm not killing him is because he's bigger than me, so I'd rather get into an argument and see if I could convince him to kill himself. Like,
Right, but that's
it
not an
sounds
argument.
like, yeah,
That's not an
and
argument.
this is exactly what I'm getting at, right? It sounds like
You're
you're
not
just
getting at
building.
anything. I already told
No,
you that like we need to establish what an argument is, and what an argument is
no.
free of fraud, free of lying, free of
Okay,
coercion, and
but
is a process towards achieving some or convincing the
yes,
other
but
person of some truth.
yeah, and it's just a very proprietary definition of argument, right? Because
What does that
if you
even
go
mean?
and
That it's
proprietary,
proprietary. Like
it's just the
I don't own this.
no, it's just the definition that you use, right? Which is
Okay, now you're just
fine.
playing. Now you're just playing like. Now you're just doing deconstructionist leftist bullshit, like trying to like
I'm
undermine
not.
language. I already
I'm not
established this is a
undermining language.
definition for argumentation in argumentation ethics.
Yeah,
This is silly. This is
okay.
leftist bullshit because you're like
No,
swinging
it's
on
not.
words.
It's not leftist bullshit, right? If you would let me talk for 1 second, you would see what I'm getting at, right? I don't mind. First of all, I don't think words are pie in the sky. Like this is the true definition of a word. I'm just saying that, of course, if you build, it's almost like you're saying argumentation should be about finding out the truth, or
No, it's not.
it.
Irrelevant.
Okay, so somebody can do something that looks like arguing, like
I made no
exchanging
moral claim about
propositional
what argumentation should be. I only said this is the narrow definition as opposed to the colloquial definition of the term argumentation, and for the logic to appropriately work in argumentation ethics. I already established that. This entire conversation is just muddying the waters.
All right. So I still don't get how arguing presupposes the norm of self-ownership. Because, like, if you're saying, oh, but if you argue but you don't believe in self-ownership, you're not arguing. It's like, well, yeah, fair enough, but you're building in the norm in there. Like, so of course, if someone who has the norm of self-ownership is arguing against self-ownership, they're in a contradiction. But if I don't believe that, but I'm still going to engage in something that's just like argumentation, where we're exchanging propositional statements to each other, then I don't see how that's a contradiction.
Would you like me to call this new thing a different word?
No, you could call it whatever you want. It's like
This is
you're
irrelevant.
saying.
This is irrelevant
No.
to argumentation ethics. Completely irrelevant.
Okay, so explain to me what if I still don't get the contradiction.
All right.
I still didn't get a contradiction.
We've gone on this for a while now, and you still don't understand like the basic arguments of argumentation ethics. So, like, because you're like, I don't get it, and that's fine.
No.
It's complicated. You should definitely check out Hopa's lectures and his 2016 primer. And I'm gonna move on with content.
Okay.
You want to make like a final statement though? Like, I don't want to be a dick and just like cut you completely off and be like, get out, bitch, or anything like that. Like, I'll let you make like a couple minute like statement as to why you still think it's wrong, uninterrupted. So you can make like a valid kind of like ending argument. But then I got to move on with other content for the night and like hang out and get going, because we get too lost in the weeds on this type of conversation, and like most of the audience just like their brain just like dumps out. They're like, what even is this? But I'll definitely, please go and make your arguments as to why you feel that I haven't been able to establish what I believe argumentation ethics establishes, and like where you think the issue is, and like I promise I won't interrupt.
Okay, so one, it would be nice to get argumentation ethics in a valid form, right? So that's one thing. I do think you guys should formalize the argument, right? But again, I'm just gonna go with this. It seems like, whatever, I know you're not gonna interrupt you, but it seems like all A advocates are saying is that there's categorical norms, or if you do something, you're automatically establishing some kind of norm, right? When if you're catching out norms in some realist sense, like there's a norm out there that you could violate, then okay. But if you're thinking about them in subjective terms, right, you have to hold a norm to violate it. So if you value human life, right, then you shouldn't do this. If you don't value human life and then you do something that goes against human life, you're not in a contradiction, because it's following from the logic of your argument that you're giving, right? Now, if you want to establish that argumentation presupposes some norm out there, it's hard to go by just the action. If somebody's just choosing to argue, that doesn't tell you what kind of norm they hold. That's one. And then two, if you're going to which is fine, I don't know why you called it leftist bullshit, but if you're going to define argumentation with norms built into it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then of course, if somebody's arguing against, if somebody's doing something that goes against the norm you just built into argumentation ethics, then they're contradicting themselves. But at that point, it's because you built in the norm, right? So the example I would give, it would be like, oh, when you have sex with a woman, it should be that you want to spend the rest of your life with her. Well, yeah, I mean, if that's what you take sex to mean, then of course, like if somebody's not doing that, they're in some kind of contradiction. But if that's not what someone takes sex to mean, then why does it matter, right? That's how I see it, right? And then I don't get logical contradictions in their form, right? I don't get it is and isn't the case that X, it isn't the case that P and not P. So I don't see where this establishes some norm of self-ownership.
Is that everything, brother? Did you have like anything else you wanted to add before we got out of here?
No, I'm good.
I appreciate you coming by. I know you're frustrated. I know it's got to be frustrating because, you know, you came like I'm a bit of a debate bro. I just think you're wrong, and like we disagree on this one, but I appreciate you coming by nevertheless. I do.
No problem. All right.
Hope you have fun.
Nice day.
Also, talk to Liquid Zulu if he'll even talk to you. because I mean, if he gets wind of this, he'll just be like, "Fuck off, commie." That's how Liquid Zulu probably would be about it. But
Yeah, I mean,
he has these things, like he does. You know, he gets this a little bit better than I do, and he has
yeah,
logic written out. Or you
I
can just
just
watch
want
the synth Zulu debate where he writes.
yeah,
it
I
up
did
for you.
watch that, and again, he didn't do a good job. And that just real quick, like just a little bit of ranting. I just don't like the gatekeeping that happens in ANCAP communities. Like, oh, if you don't believe in AE, you're not an ANCAP. It's just, to me, it's kind of corny, right? As long as you come to the conclusion that people rights shouldn't be violated, I don't see why you have to believe in AE to be an ANCAP.
Yeah,
Like
no, I
that.
mean, like, look, I said you're a market anarchist that likes anarcho-capitalism as and many of the prescriptions within it. The reason I gatekeep you out of being an ANCAP is many of the ways that I was gatekept myself out of being an ANCAP by Liquid Zulu until I had to really like fucking, go into the theory. You cannot be an ANCAP and have that position. It's not possible for you to be an ANCAP and to believe that there are situations where it is morally justifiable to aggress upon another. It is the fundamental belief of anarcho-capitalism. To say that you don't believe in the fundamental belief of anarcho-capitalism, but you are an ANCAP despite not believing in the fundamental belief of the philosophy, is to say that you believe in a lot of similar things, and that's awesome. I appreciate you as an ally against the state and as someone that's willing to fight back against crazy leftist ideology as well as crazy leftist economic prescriptions and statism and politics and all of those things, right? But you're not an ANCAP, and that's okay, right? Like it's okay to not be. It's okay to be a market anarchist, right? It's okay to be a David Friedman, but like that, but not believing in the non-aggression principle fully and wholly,
Well,
is makes you not an ANCAP.
yeah, I mean, I know you said you gotta go, but it's like you almost didn't even ask me what my moral prescriptions are, and you just like assumed that I think
Because
taxation or something.
anarcho-capitalism is a descriptive philosophy of natural law, and if you deny that, then you're not an ANCAP. It doesn't matter what your prescriptions are, even if your prescriptions align with anarcho-capitalist theory 100%. It's not about
Yeah,
prescriptions. It's about, do you believe in natural law and an objective ethic? And you said, I 100% believe in subjective ethics and that it's all about human values. And it's like, you can
yeah,
believe that. And I don't even think that makes you evil per se or anything like that. I'm not
yeah.
shitting on you. I'm just saying that that's not anarcho-capitalism.
But I mean, it's kind of odd that you say you need to establish an objective ethic, but you're gonna use an argument where you're not sure if an objective ethic even exists or not, right? When I ask
It's,
you a question, which
but
one
I'm
is
not,
which?
it's not deontological, right? It's a recognition that there are rules of logic that apply to rational creatures and that these negate certain things, and that and via that negation, what is justifiable, right, is we don't know. There's no claim about what is justifiable. There's only the claim about what is unjustifiable, right? So there's no cringe there. You don't need to be a Christian deontologist or anything in order to be an
I didn't.
ANCAP. You just have to believe that there are certain things under natural law that objectively cannot be morally justifiable.
Yeah, and by justifiable you mean run into a contradiction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I would love to hear that contradiction someday.
Fair
All
enough.
right,
Fair enough.
it
You
was
don't
nice
believe that
talking to
I've
you.
presented it. I believe that I did. And we're just going to have to agree to
Okay.
disagree on that. And much love. Appreciate you as a valued member of the community. Have fun.
All right, no problem.
All right.